Hi, I'm Lauren and welcome to my craft room. Today I'm continuing this month's Interactive Element series featuring the Lawn Fawn Magic Picture Changer dies. And today I've partnered them with Kindred Stamps Rags to Riches stamp set to create this fun birthday card. I have a godmother, a soon-to-be princess, and a couple mice here on this card. And when you pull the pull tab, a fun surprise happens to our soon-to-be princess here. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it inspires you to create an interactive card using this die set as well.
I'm bringing out my Misty along with some mixed media paper, and I'm going to be stamping some images from the Rags to Riches set by Kindred Stamps. I'm stamping out the fairy godmother and two of the little mice, and I'm going to be using my VersaFine and Onyx black because I am going to be watercoloring, and I like to emboss my images when watercoloring. It creates a barrier so that way I can color in multiple sections without having to wait for the paint to dry. The color will stay kind of inside that well of the part of the image that I'm coloring, and that emboss line will contain all that water. I'm embossing with some detail transparent or clear embossing powder, and I'm using my heat gun to melt the powder so that it creates these nice, clean, shiny lines. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to be using the Magic Picture Changer dies to help me know how big of a paper and where exactly I need to stamp my image. So first I'm stamping the insert. I'm using the die as a guide, like I said in my Misty, and I'm going to stamp the princess stamp with her in her pretty gown on the insert piece. Again, stamping in that VersaFine, making sure I have a nice clear image, and then embossing it with that transparent detail clear. The detail is really important for images like this. If there's really lots of detail, the detail powder is a little finer and it makes sure that there's a really nice clean line on your embossed image. For the larger die, this creates the pocket. I'm going to be stamping my soon-to-be princess in her rags outfit and using that guide again in my Misty, stamping with my VersaFine because I'm going to also emboss this image. I want to make sure I have a nice clean image, so sometimes I will stamp twice, which is the great thing about using the Misty. It keeps my image in place, and that way I know I won't accidentally double stamp, creating kind of a shadow look. Using my heat gun to emboss this image, and now I can begin watercoloring. I'm going to start with my fairy godmother, and I'm bringing out my Zig Clean Color brush pens, and I'm going to show you how I apply ink and then use a water brush to spread that color around in the image. I'm going to be using gray as well as some blues for her robe, and she has kind of a magenta pink bow, and then also using some lighter peach tones for her skin and cheeks. And then I will be using a Wink of Stella brush to paint in her magic wand. For the mice, I'm going to be using browns as well as some red and orange colors for one of the mice, and then yellow and teal for the other mouse. And I'm going to go ahead and skip through this part because you can kind of get the idea of how I color. I apply the ink to the edges of the image and use my water pen to spread that color out. And here are the images all colored in. And now I can proceed on to my princess. The princess in her gown, I'm going to color her hair. She has kind of a blonde, but a little more kind of darker blonde hair. It's not like a white blonde. So I'm using a yellow and kind of a yellowish brown, almost an orange yellowish brown, kind of orangey color. And I'm going to color her hair in with those colors just to create that more deeper blonde look. I'm going to use the same colors I used for her skin the same as the fairy godmother. I was debating between coloring her dress blue, like the typical images you see of this princess, but if you watch the original cartoon movie, her dress is actually white and very shiny and shimmery. So I do use kind of a lighter blue along with a really light gray to color in her dress, but I top it with my Wink of Stella in clear glitter, and that way there is that tint of blue and gray to her dress, but it is mostly a sparkle color. And here you can see the final colored in image. For the part of the card where the princess is in her rags outfit, I'm using the same colors for her hair and skin, and then I'm using an image from the movie to help me color in her outfit. So I use kind of a off-white gray color to color in her head handkerchief and her apron, and then her dress is blue and brown, and then I colored in the brush and bucket just using different browns from my watercolor collection, and that will finish up our watercoloring for this card. So while my two images of the princess are drying, I'm going to fussy cut out my fairy godmother and my mice. I also have a little part of the fairy godmother that I didn't get to with my fussy cutting between her wand and her head. So I'm just using a retractable knife to get into that spot. I wanted a thin white line around my image, and this was a really thick part. So I am just going to cut that out to make it more consistent around the image. I have a white gel pen, and I'm just adding some accents to my images before I move on to coloring in the background behind my princesses. So to create this pocket, I have the larger image as my first initial image, the larger die piece, and I wanted to stress some brown behind my princess. So after I'm done coloring these with my white gel pen, I stamped out some masks for my princesses just on some post-it notes I keep on my desk, and I'm going to use those as a mask so that way I can distress some color in my background behind these stamped images. Because these are a part of the magic picture changer, you can't have any dimension or the die won't work, so we have to make a flat scene. So I brought out my brushed corduroy in Distress Oxide, and I'm just distressing behind my princess here in her rags outfit, and I'm trying to color it enough around that when the die cut is cut, the window part where the princess is visible, you won't see any missing ink. I pull that mask off and it looks really great. So now I'm pulling off two in blue now, and I'm masking up my princess in her gown, and I'm going to be using Speckled Egg closest around my princess. I want to kind of create like she's got a glowing look to her, so I'm using a lighter blue closest to the stamped image. I'm going to go all the way around her mask. Then I'm going to bring out Chipped Sapphire, a darker blue, and I'm going to distress the rest of my paper. So now I'm bringing it in from the edge and going in towards that speckled egg, so that way again I'm trying to create like a glowing look because her dress is just sparkly and beautiful. So I'm coloring in the rest of this paper. And I should have colored the whole thing in because the pull tab now only has color on part of it, but I will fix that later. I don't realize it until I put it together. So I took my mask off, but then I wanted to put on some splatter using my clear splatter from Fun Stamper's Journey. It is called Sparkle Silk, and that's just to also create some magical effect around my princess. And now I'm ready to die cut it using the insert to the magic picture changer. I'm using some purple tape in my magnetic sheet to make sure it stays in place, and I've cut it out. It looks like it's really low, but don't worry, that's how it's supposed to be. And now I'm gonna cut out my princess and her rags for the pocket piece, again using my purple tape and my magnetic sheet, and run that through. So now we can start assembling. I'm using my bone folder to help me create some nice creases on the pocket part of this die. I'm folding over the really thin pieces as well as the top, and I'm putting my insert in. Now you're supposed to put in the tabs from bottom to top. That makes it the easiest to assemble this part. And I pull out my baby powder tool to make sure that there are no stickiness or roughness to my edges. I'm putting it over every single piece that was die cut. I want to make sure that everything is smooth and nothing is going to get stuck when I'm running this through or operating the Magic Picture Changer die. So now I'm using my 1/8 score tape on the pocket pieces that are scored and folded in. I'm using my bone folder just to make sure those have a really nice seal to the paper. I'm putting together my picture changer, and here you can see I did it backwards. I did it from top to bottom, and I'm struggling. It's so much easier if you go from bottom to top. So when you put it together, remember, bottom insert and work your way up. And I'm putting a ton of baby powder again. I don't want it to get stuck. I want it to be smooth. And once it is good, I pull down my score tape release paper just a little bit so I can get the placement of the top part of my pocket. And then I can pull off the rest and make sure I have a nice seal by using my bone folder. So now it's together. It seems to be working fine. Throwing in a little extra baby powder for good measure. And now I can finish putting my pocket together. I bring out the frame as well as the larger frame from the add-on set and the pull tab. I want to kind of create a look like she's inside of her house, so I pulled out some craft paper and some brown, and that way it looks like she's looking out of a window. I have this card base. It's a really old card base, I think by Hero Arts from, I don't even know, 10 years ago. And they've just been sitting there waiting to be used. So I pulled one out in this pretty blue color. I used the largest of the small stitch rectangles by Lawn Fawn to cut this pearlescent vellum. And now I'm just playing with the layout because I want to stamp a happy birthday sentiment, but want to make sure that my images all have a place on the card. So I'm grabbing my Misty, and I have a happy birthday sentiment from this set, and using the Misty as well as all my die pieces, forgive my hair showing here, I want to make sure my sentiment is straight. I'm going to stamp the sentiment in that same VersaFine ink in black Onyx. So now that I've made it sure it was straight, I'm going to stamp, and then I'm going to emboss it with this really pretty embossing powder from Kindred Stamps. It came in a box set. It's their Snow Sparkle powder. It's very similar to the Ranger holographic, which I will have linked below because Kindred Stamps does not sell this embossing powder. Hopefully soon they'll have it for sale. And now that that is embossed, I can glue my frame on to my Magic Picture Changer die. So I decided that I wanted to add an inside sentiment. There's this really nice sentiment from the stamp set that I want to put on the inside of the card. So I am trying to make it as center as possible to my card base, and I'm going to stamp just using some black licorice ink from Lawn Fawn. I'm not coloring it, and that way it just has a nice look to the sentiment. And it says, "Life itself is the most wonderful fairy tale," and I just thought it was a really sweet sentiment for the card. Now that this is done, I'm going to start putting everything together. I'm getting my craft piece and I'm applying sticky tape from the corners, the inside corner to the outside corner, and then along the top and bottom. This is because we don't want to risk any sticky tape getting stuck to the pieces in the mechanism. So I'm going to pick up that release tape. There's a little notch on the top part that lines up with the notch on the pocket for where the pull tab comes out. I'm making sure everything is lined up nice and straight before really pressing down and making that seal. I'm using the same sticky tape around this brown frame window piece here. I'm applying it to all four sides and then using my bone folder to make sure it has a really nice seal before picking up the release paper. I find that it makes it easier to take off that release tape release paper from the tape. And I'm using my bone folder just to make sure everything has a nice seal and my mechanism is still functioning. So now this is where I realized where I didn't color the whole pull tab. So I'm coloring that in and just using a post-it note to make sure I don't get any blue on the pocket. And now I need to cut out the pull tab part, the actual pull tab. And I did that in some of the Pixie Sparkle cardstock from Lawn Fawn. And I'm gonna glue this to my pull tab. I'm using my tape runner to put the pull tab on, the arrow part of my pull tab on, but it ran out. So I got out my white wet glue and I'm going to use an acrylic block just to kind of help add pressure and make sure that it has a nice seal. Now my pocket is all put together and my picture changer is ready to be glued onto the card. I'm using my larger tape runner now, and I'm gonna glue this onto the vellum. I'm placing the vellum where it will go on my card base and then applying some purple tape to keep it in place, and then gluing my picture changer die to the vellum. This is because I need to glue my vellum down, but I don't want it to be visible when it's glued to the card base. So now I know exactly where to put glue. Now to glue on my images, I'm using a mix of dimensionals. I checked to make sure that the depth of my dimensional would be the same as my picture changer die. And I'm adding dimensionals to the part of my Godmother that will be touching the card base, and then a little bit of glue that will be touching the brown part of the changer pocket. Again, I'm not wanting to get any glue onto where the mechanism is, so I just want to be extra careful with that. Now for my mice, I'm gluing the mouse with the little red coat directly onto the card, and then I'm going to pop up the mouse with the yellow shirt in front, so that way it kind of gives a little bit of depth. So now that they are all glued on and my picture changer die is working great, I wanted to add a little bit more bling. I wasn't sure if I wanted to use these blue jewels or these iridescent jewels or these tiny little white sparkly jewels, so I laid a bunch out, and then using my jewel picker I laid them onto the card to see how I would use them. I ended up not using the blue jewels. I felt they were a little too dark and I wanted to keep the sparkle kind of consistent from the Pixie cardstock as well as the pearlescent paper and all of the Wink of Stella, so I thought using the white dots and these iridescent jewels would be best. So I'm using my jewel picker and just putting them in various spots around the card as I like them, and once I'm happy with it, I'm going to bring out my wet glue and glue them down. Now that it's done, I'm going to pick up my little mess here. Here is the baggie of the iridescent jewels. I'll link the Etsy shop down below. But here is the final card. I love it. It's shimmery and happy, and it's so fun to see our princess in her rags and then magically changing into her beautiful gown. I hope you enjoyed watching this card. I hope it inspires you to also create an interactive card. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and have a wonderful day.